Today on the Topping Show, Miller Lite embraces feminism and alienates their current customers. Biden wants to ban semi-automatic rifles. Bud Light wants to give you a $20 rebate for a $20 case of beer. EU to allow the Microsoft-Activision purchase. FoxConn opens their India factory. Buc-ees opens their second store in Kentucky. And Martha Stewart, age 81, is on the Sports Illustrated cover. Also, Brandon Johnson is sworn in as Chicago's new mayor. All that and much, much more on The Topping Show. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Today's episode of Topping Show is sponsored by Topping Technologies. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added resort and services company with a special proficiency in IT security. Heck, I see their founder released twice today. Gotta say, he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, that's a joke. If you're an IT leader, business owner, can use a little assistance with your IT, you reach the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Now, going on to the business part of the podcast, you have Bud Light offering people a $20 rebate for a case of beer that they still can't sell. Now, Bud Light, of course, being in hot water recently, or for the past 30 days about, after they had Dylan Mulvaney, a trans activist, become their brand ambassador, in which they paid Dylan more money than most people make in a year for a couple of simple photos. Granted, that's exceptional ROI from Dylan's input in terms of effort. Granted, there's been a massive boycott with millions of people refusing to drink their piss water. I mean, hops. No, legally it is alcoholic beer. Now, nevertheless, it's been about 33 days since their last tweet, so they've been on a media blackout. People have actually gone back to their old videos on YouTube and their old tweets to send them memes and ridicule, basically poke fun at them and how they alienated most of their customer base. And also, people on the left also feel particularly annoyed with Bud Light because Bud Light did not stick with Dylan Mulvaney. So there's actually gay bars in Chicago that have profoundly said they will no longer ever sell Bud Light. So brilliantly, they've now alienated both sides of the political aisle. And of course, there's a lot of people in the middle wondering, why on earth does this beer have to have a sexual orientation or a message of any political meaning behind it? So they are scrambling, trying to figure out how do they turn around this, how do they just stop the bleeding? Because even in California, even that state and that geography, even those sales numbers are down for Bud Light. It's across the board, but even in those states, it's still decreasing their sales. And there's a lot of people poking fun at this because traditionally, you look at the person who drank Bud Light, college frat guys, blue-collar workers. On average, most people would argue heterosexual men was their biggest demographic. And a lot of people are making fun of them for doing a rebate and coupons because men really don't use coupons. If you look at the demographics of who utilizes coupons, who really enjoys, I know it's kind of a cliche now, but back in the day, actually clipping coupons physically out of the Sunday paper, overwhelmingly, females are who are attracted to those types of promotions. Historically speaking, one of the best examples being JCPenney and Bed Bath Beyond. Those businesses flourished because moms love the coupons. They love the kind of like the treasure hunt of finding the best deal. Now, most men don't care about coupons, and folks like myself value their time I put a premium on my time, and no one's really going to give a damn about a rebate especially. So a coupon takes a little bit of effort. You have to clip it out, show it to the cashier, or save it for another day. That's already a barrier of annoyance. But a rebate, how many people, again, what is your time worth? They're going to buy that piss water, Bud Light beer. They're going to take it home. Maybe they have to write down the product ID code or the receipt identifier, but they're going to fill out this form, a rebate card, mail it in, pray to God the USPS actually makes it there, and then at that time they'll send you some money back with a gift card or something. Like, no one is going to do that. Like, just no one's going to care that much. So ironically enough, or hilariously enough, they have that $20 rebate, and some of those cases of beer are like $19.98 or $19.99 for a case, so $19.99. It's getting to the point where they cannot give it away. And I was actually talking to one of the distributors at my local Walmart where they were restocking the store, and I was talking to him about the logistics and what does it cost if you have to take the beer back, because beer does expire. Granted, it does taste like just expired from the factory with Bud Light. Nevertheless, you do have a lot of foods that they expire. a lot of these stores, like grocery stores, I don't know about the specifics of the Walmart, I didn't go into that detail, but he said on average, most grocery stores, they actually just dump it down the drain when it expires. Now, smaller stores will actually return it to the distributor to return it to the manufacturer. So imagine the cost of, again, you have to move these heavy cans, which of course take time, money, energy, fuel, to transport it to the distributor, to the actual manufacturer. It's a prohibitive process, both fiscally as well as you just think about people's time. So the case is not getting any better for Bud Light, and more people are starting to wake up to the fact that, oh yeah, InBev, the parent company in Belgium, they own about 50 to 52 brands of beer, and those brands are also going to be affected as more people on the left and the right are starting to boycott that brand. So interesting idea to have a little rebate, but I don't think it's going to do much to turn this trend around. Now, other interesting business news, you have the EU allowing the Microsoft-Activision purchase. Now, this is what European regulators say will be, quote, what would be the largest deal in 2 decades, unquote. It came after negotiating with Microsoft that they would publish third-party games on other consoles so they wouldn't have the exclusive console releases. Now, Activision is already a huge company. They bought Blizzard, one of the largest video game companies in history, best known for making World of Warcraft. So Activision has some of the most successful video game properties ever. Perhaps the one that is most infamous is Call of Duty. Now, it's interesting that the EU is saying this is okay. The UK, a couple weeks ago, struck it down. And of course, Microsoft being a huge global company, they have to get a buy-in or approval, rather, from all these regulatory commissions. And the UK is still against, this is about a $69 billion acquisition. And again, the UK specifically, when Microsoft was trying to negotiate with them, they said they didn't care that Microsoft was agreeing to a 10-year period in which they released the titles or the games on multiple consoles. So the UK was saying that's not really a negotiating tactic, or rather something that they value in that pitch or proposal, so to say. And the US is still a little squeamish about it as well. They're really not confident because you have the largest software company on the planet, who Microsoft, spoiler alert, they own Xbox, they made it internally. Another great example of let engineers do what they do best, have fun. That was a side project engineers had at night where they were just working on a video game console and they disrupted the whole industry. Took the prototype to Bill Gates, and now they're the most successful consoles in history. Now, I digress, but it is one of those situations where Microsoft is already an OS in terms of operating system monopoly when you have your computers. I'm not too confident, though, the US government will allow them to increase their video game footprint with one of the largest, if not the largest, video game publishers and creators. Time shall tell. Now, other electronic business news, you have FoxConn opening up a $500 million factory in India. Now, FoxConn, fun little business fact, they're legally known as Han High Precision Industry Co. They're a Taiwanese multinational electronics manufacturer. They make about 70% of the iPhones in the world. And of course, they also make many of the components inside of electronics. So fun little fact, maybe not fact, fun little exploratory thing I like to do is electronic breaks and the engineers, they can't fix it. I have some fun just tearing it apart, getting a screwdriver out, taking the whole thing apart and saying, hey, who actually makes what components? Where does it come from? It's a fascinating little fun thing to do if you have broken hardware in the house. Of course, make sure you do it safely, unplug the battery, make sure it's not plugged in the wall, etc. But it'll be interesting to see as they expand their India production. This new factory will employ about 25,000 workers in the first phase. This is according to the tweet by the Indian government. And this also comes 1 month after Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and apologize if I'm butchering the name a little bit. And this is part of a further bigger trend of Apple moving away from their dependence on China. Previously, before COVID, China basically had a monopoly when it comes to Apple manufacturing. An overwhelming majority of all their iPhones, iMacs, I don't give a damn, whatever product it's called, it was made there by FoxConn. And China was one of the strictest countries when it comes to lockdowns and the factories, which of course caused a big supply chain issue. And Apple is quite concerned, how do we get our products out if they cannot be made? And the businesses that weren't very diversified in terms of global manufacturing, those are the ones who had the biggest constraints and they struggled the most. So it'll be interesting to see as Apple continues to expand how that partnership with India will continue as well. They actually recently opened their first storefront in the country a couple months ago as well. Other interesting business news, you have Buc-ees opening their second location in Kentucky. Buc-ees is a Texas phenomenon, one of the most successful convenience stores ever. It has a cult following, thanks partially, I think, to their fun little mascot, which is a little beaver. And personally, I like it just because they have clean restrooms, premium gas is good, and it really is an experience. They have everything you need from a road trip perspective. From, they have the cliche, beef jerky, energy drinks, coffee, but they also have their own in-house cooked brisket and other fun little treats that you can get on the road. So it's gaining a huge amount of momentum. They're expanding exponentially. They even have Tesla chargers at the one, I forget which Texas location I drove past, but they're also diversifying the company from the traditional fossil fuels. So a lot of people realize, for many who don't know, gas stations, a majority of their profit comes from the convenience branch of the business. It's not the actual fuel. They make a little, a couple cents. They make a little bit of money on the fuel, which in aggregate over time with massive quantities does make a fair amount of profit. But if you look at the pie chart of where it comes from, it's the food, the drinks, the beverages, the merchandise that they sell. So if you're a prudent business owner and you're thinking about starting a gas station, you want to put a big emphasis on the products you can buy inside the store, making that experience as pleasant as possible, which they, of course, have knocked out of the park. I did a recent LinkedIn poll where I asked, what's your favorite gas stations? And I think because I was writing about Quick Trip opening their 1,000th location, I did a poll of, Quick Trip, Racetrack, or there's a third one. It eludes me at the time, but I actually didn't have Buc-ees. And I had about 70 comments. Over half the comments were people asking about Buc-ees. And in terms of the number of locations, they are not the biggest. That's where they struggle, but the locations they do have are quite large in scale. Now, they currently have 45 stores in the U.S., mainly Texas and the southern, and this new store will groundbreak on June 5th, of that being a Monday. So it'll be interesting to see, can they keep up with the competition when I don't think they'll ever beat the others by number of locations, since it's a different business model. The other stores are if you look at QT, Quick T being Quick Trip, or Racetrack, those stores are much, much, much smaller. I'd venture to say a fifth or a tenth. The footprint is quite small, which is also why you don't have a lot of Buc-ees in high congested areas like downtowns or even suburbs. They really thrive on the outskirts of towns where you could have that massive footprint where they have more gas pumps than you can possibly count. I've never had to wait for a gas pump when I've gone there, which is awesome and exceptionally great experience. Now, going on to the culture part of the podcast, it's a little bit of a sad news with Elon having a new Twitter CEO, Linda Yaccardio, and it appears he's starting to ban people if you just make fun of her. Now, for those who don't know, she is more left-leaning. If you look at her political statements, who she works with, she's worked with both Trump and Biden in terms of marketing campaigns, so she has a little bit of experience on both sides of the political aisle, and she does follow some people on the right on Twitter, such as Ben Shapiro and other political commentators. But it's interesting to see that Elon's starting to censor people who critique her. So Elon tweeted, quote, "As soon as Linda is ready, we will do a Spaces where you can ask us anything," unquote. And a Twitter user by the name of Top Lobster, which, huge business loss. He apparently does not own a lobster restaurant, which, I don't know. I feel like you'd have to be in the seafood industry to have that name. Nevertheless, his response to that tweet was, quote, "We prefer you launch Linda into space," unquote. Or is it Lindsay? Nevertheless, now, apparently, he has screenshots to disprove this. Top Lobster, his account later said, quote, "Your account was suspended due to violations to our terms of service. After reviewing your reinstatement request for your account, you will not be restored," unquote. And apparently, if you search for his account, it would just be a big white blank page that said, "This account has been suspended." Now, I did a little search for his account a couple hours ago, and it appears, I don't know if it's a duplicate account, but it looks like it's up, but he doesn't have any recent tweets. So maybe they pulled back on them, but it's still not a good sign that, again, that's not a threat. I mean, I guess Elon does own SpaceX, but I don't think his intent was literally to tell him to send her to space. Although from the literal perspective, he might have just been telling him she'd be an exceptional astronaut. Maybe look at the glass half full, Elon. He's giving you some critique on how to build out the SpaceX team. Probably not, but still, it's just a simple thing where a little critique. And if you look at her path or her history of priorities, she's being brought in to boost the advertising revenue. And one of the suggestions she's had publicly at venues is you can do that by decreasing free speech, also known as censorship. Time will tell, and her actions will speak louder than words, or perhaps louder than tweets in this case. But hopefully she's had a change of heart, or Elon has had a chat with her behind closed doors. Either way, there's a lot of skepticism around this. Now, other interesting cultural news, you have Martha Stewart being put on the cover of Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition. Now, Martha Stewart is 81 years old. And I'm sorry, 80 is not the new 60 or the new 40 or the whatever cliche you want to say. And some are praising her because she's probably had some work done. She appears to somewhat take care of herself, but it is in no way means beautiful in the conventional form or even just logical or traditional in any sense. I mean, if you look at her career path, she's now known for making commercials with Snoop Dogg praising or highlighting the great use of lighters for marijuana or drugs, which is a far fall from the homesteader she used to be portrayed as. So she's now known for making those cliche commercials with Snoop Dogg where they both have lighters, make jokes that obviously reference illegal drugs. And this is by no means the first business blunder of Sports Illustrated. And it's interesting to see the cultural push that they're trying to have done through this. Now, if you look at the Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition Facebook page, which it's hilarious to say, but I really do mean I used it for educational purposes only, because nothing on there will make your heart race. Now, their new logo, if you look at their Facebook profile logo, it literally says, "Pay with change." And granted, some people still use hard currency in the United States. I don't think they mean change in terms of actual coinage. And this isn't the first controversy, but in terms of culture, it seems like more and more culture is praising things that are not traditionally beautiful. And it's bizarre to see companies with massive amounts of power shift their whole marketing campaigns and shift their definitions of beauty. Sports Illustrated also had an overweight model on the cover, which a political commentator and psychologist by the name of Jordan Peterson critiqued. And he was actually, I believe he was banned on Twitter for just being honest and saying no one is attracted to that. Now, those are his words, not mine. I would say 0.000000012% of the population is attracted to that. It's not zero. People have different, it was a wise man, I think he said, different strokes for different folks. There are certainly people who have different things that they're attracted to, but on average, most people are attracted to healthy prospective mates, healthy prospective partners, prospective wives, whatever you want to call the vernacular. There is such a thing as someone who is beautiful in the traditional sense. Again, Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition traditionally was specifically targeting heterosexual men. If you look at their audience of who they sold those magazines to, they've also had a trans woman on their cover as well. I think they're doing that again in a couple of weeks. There's just a breaking announcement a couple hours ago, further culturally changing what the business of Sports Illustrated considers to be beauty. Again, how many people might buy magazines these days? 0.0333. It's a comically small percent, and the only reason they're alive is because of the advertisers that pay money to be in the magazine to keep the cost down. But it's interesting to see this cultural shift from media and companies completely obliterating what logically used to be the traditional sense of beauty for these new different things. There is such a thing as aging gracefully, but to have her on the cover is such a bizarre thing. It perplexes my mind beyond all belief. But time shall tell how much this increases her sales. I'm pretty pessimistic. Now, going over to the politics part of the podcast, you have Biden saying that he will ban AR-15s. Recently, he went to the 2023 graduation ceremony for Howard University, and which is a predominantly historically African American university. And in 2023, not 1920 or 1930, in 2023, during his speech, he said the biggest threat in the United States right now is white supremacy. Also, we need to take your guns. Now, I don't know anyone. It's just one of those things where I'm sure there are white supremacists out there. There's probably 10 left. I mean, it's morally repugnant, disgusting. But again, I always tell people, show me the racism or show me the bad actors so you could both peacefully protest the companies that support them and them themselves with their actions. But it's one of those things where I always like to tell people capitalism beat racism decades ago. If you look at the most successful companies, they want the greatest sample size for new prospective new hires. They want the greatest number of clients. That means you're not going to alienate a complete sector of that. It's just illogical. You get a smaller sample size, you're not going to get the top candidates. So it's one of those things where I don't feel it's authentic for him to say this. Also, the AR-15 is identical to any gun that you've had in the past 100 plus years. He's trying to push for the assault weapons ban. If you look into the definition of that, again, that term was coined brilliantly and disgustingly by political activists to actually poll people to see what term is the scariest. It certainly isn't accurate, considering, again, it's a semi-automatic rifle. For most of history, I say in all of your history and all my history, that's an overwhelming majority of all guns made. There are companies that make a lever action rifle, which of course is actuated with a lever, and you have bolt action rifles and revolvers. But if you look at the volume of all firearms manufactured, a semi-auto is basically all of them. And again, he wants to reenact the 1994 ban, which thankfully the Supreme Court would shoot down in New York minute, pun somewhat intended. But it's also common use. And again, AR-15s account for, I believe the FBI said it's less than 2% of all homicides. So again, that rifle is a cliche that people say is bad because it looks scary. It does cosmetically look identical to the military one, which is full auto, but unless you have special licenses, or again, you can afford a $30,000 to $50,000 rifle, thanks to the NFA, also known as National Firearms Act, meaning it had to be, in the law, it has to be manufactured and registered with the government before 1984. You have to live in a state that allows it. Thanks to that supply-demand curve, machine guns are basically like unicorns. 2 or 3 people, or even, I guess they're not as rare, but you get the gist. Now, other interesting political news, you have Brandon Johnson being sworn in as the new mayor of Chicago. He's the 57th mayor, and during his commencement speech, or his takeover speech, he noted that Chicago has a quote-unquote rich history, which he did say with a straight face. I can confirm that. He's taking over for Lori Lightfoot, who presided over one of the highest crime increases. And it's interesting enough, Brandon said, quote, "The soul of Chicago tells us we will never close our doors to those who come here searching for a better life," unquote. And he also noted that, quote, "That has always been the soul of Chicago and will always be the soul of Chicago," unquote. Now, I would argue that Chicago is a soulless hellhole with history and as bleak as the weather that is there, but he's actually referencing to the influx of immigrants, or more accurately, the refugees who are coming here and they're being transported to the city. And a lot of people in the city are starting to be concerned that the resource allocation is becoming scarcer because logically you have a finite number of resources unless you're the government spending money, but most folks have a finite number of resources and theirs are decreasing because you have an increase in the number of people utilizing those resources. Now, I feel bad, actually no I wouldn't, but people in Chicago, again, the current migration, all those policies are being enacted on the federal level and signed off on. So if you look at who voted in Chicago, in 2022, 97% of the residents voted for Biden. Again, 97%, which makes sense for having one of the DNC conventions there. It is the heart of the DNC. Everyone there basically is getting what they vote for. He says the soul of Chicago. Again, I, from a business perspective, I challenge someone to name one business that has moved to Chicago in the past 2 to 3 years. Please name one in the comment section. Let me know. But as far as I can tell, businesses are fleeing. One of the most successful defense contractors and aviation companies in history, Boeing, left Chicago. Their historical headquarters used to be in Chicago. Even they left. You also have Tyson Foods relocating all their offices out of the city. People are leaving in droves. Somehow, McDonald's is still headquartered in Chicago. I don't know why, since the company likes to give their customers the best return on investment, and to be in the city of Chicago is extremely expensive from real estate and a talent perspective, since it boggles the mind. But I thought that was interesting. The soul of Chicago. And of course, he's elected to fix the crime that they've had 100 years to fix. Of course, if you look at historically who's controlled the city, they've had the same political people, Democrats, holding the city for about 100 years. But they voted him, and they'll get exactly what they vote for. I hope he's able to turn it around. I've searched some of his political statements. I've looked at some of his political ideals, and personally, I think, I'm always skeptical of why someone would highlight race so much in political talk or even talk in general. I'm someone who likes to judge a man by his character and his actions, but from his speeches, that's something he likes to emphasize quite a bit. Time shall tell if he's able to turn the city around, but it is pretty big political news that Chicago actually ousted Lori Lightfoot, which, again, they voted for her in overwhelming numbers. So time shall tell if he's able to turn the city around, attract businesses, decrease crime. We'll see. Now, going on to the business blunder of the day. Miller Lite is becoming a feminist brand. Why? Well, apparently it was to celebrate National Women's Month, or Women's History Month. And they made a commercial which I find disgusting on a moral level in terms of what they're doing with destroying history, but it's also debatably inaccurate. And let's pull it up so you can take a listen to it. And they thought this was a good idea. Apparently this was released about a month ago, before Bud Light had their drastic decrease in sales thanks to the Mulvaney incident. But let me know if this sounds like a commercial that will appeal, again, to their core clients, core customers, or somehow magically gain them an exponential greater amount of new customers.
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever.
They were among the one. So if they were among the people to first brew beer, who are the other people there? Could it be men? Yeah, probably.
From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow.
That's because men buy beer more than women. Makes sense. It's called appealing to your customers.
Look at this.
Now, she's currently walking past some of the most iconic standees in advertising history. Standee being those cardboard cutouts of the attractive women holding Miller Lights.
Wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their shit, but the whole beer industry's shit. Miller Lite.
So she's currently putting an old advertisement in a shredder. So to her, this reminds me of that book, 1984, where everything must be rewritten in history. And as someone who collects signs, if you're just tuning in and you're listening to this on a podcast platform, behind me are some of the most iconic businesses in history which are defunct. So they're old business signages, and I also like to collect old business advertising materials, partially because advertising fascinates me from a business perspective. It's something that's constantly evolving and ever-moving target, where how do you most effectively increase sales by trying to find a new client or appealing to the current client base. Something I find utterly disgusting is destroying history like that.
Light has been scouring the internet for all this shit and buying it back so that he can turn it into good shit for women brewers. Literally, good shit.
So there's a bag of shit, which it does not have a can of Miller Lite or Bud Light in it. That is strange, but...
How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad shit into compost. Then
So, I'm not a farmer by trade, but I know how to grow some tomatoes and crap. Now, compost is supposed to have nutrients, be good for it. If you look at an old standee or an old poster, you have probably hazardous chemicals. It's certainly not natural ink most of the time, I would think, and old cardboard. Not a lot of nutrients. I don't think there's a lot of nutrients in there. Let's keep going. This is getting really good.
We feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer. That good helps farmers grow quality hops,
which is then donated to women brewers to make their own really good
But there's definitely more out there. In your attic, in the garage, in your parents' basement. Send any you got into Miller Light, and they'll turn that into good too. Oh. So here's to women, because without us, there would be no beer.
There'd also be no women if there's no men, but I digress. To benefit hundreds of women brewers. May the boycott begin because you just alienated your current client base. Now, it should be important to note this is a real campaign. Someone signed off on this thinking it was a good idea. This is also a real link, so you could spend hard-earned dollars on vintage Miller Lite memorabilia, ship it to them, and they will destroy it. Which, I think Sean Connery said it best when it was Indiana Jones' The Last Crusade, and he was confronting the Nazis, talking about, what's so important in your book, Mr. Jones? He goes, well, it teaches me that... And again, no, this will probably hurt many people's ears. He says something to the effect of, he tells me you should read more books than burning them. Which, yeah, people who burn books are typically not on the right side of history. I've yet to find a single use case where that is true. And is discussing that they would rewrite history by destroying pieces of marketing history, pieces of American history. It built that brand. A lot of people, that's a highlight. It's a piece of marketing material that should be preserved. It should be some say it should be a museum. Another Indiana Jones cliche reference. But to be proud of the fact that you were destroying history? Don't get me wrong, every one of these brands is disgustingly doing it with new campaigns and chastising all the other geniuses whose shoulders they stand upon to be where they are today. But to go out of your way to physically destroy pieces of history? That's disgusting. That's even worse than just having a new advertisement, in my opinion. So you're alienating your current clients. You're also destroying pieces of history. Some would say that's a cultural blunder as well, but that is certainly the business blunder of the day. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to tune in today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Each one of those things really helps the channel out. Appreciate the feedback. Also, share it. Also, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.